Tonight on Coach's Corner, it's a man that has done it all. Sports agent Leigh Steinberg stops by to discuss his career, the athletes he represents, his view on sports, the movie Jerry Maguire, and much more. I'm Paul Higgins. This is Coach's Corner, and it all starts right now. Hello everybody, I'm Paul Higgins and welcome once again to Coach's Corner on location at the shops at Mission Viejo. Special guest joining me today, and it's Leigh Steinberg. As you can tell in the opening of the show, Leigh has had an incredible career and he continues that today. And Leigh, I welcome you to Coach's Corner, and I showed you my questions, and these are my questions, Leigh. We're just going to run the gamut of sports. A white piece of paper.
I'm not sure I can handle them. That paper looks pretty daunting.
You know, I met you. I don't know if you remember, but I remember because I was pretty amazed at meeting you and early on in my career. But when I met you, you were actually signing Kerry Collins. And you had him in your office, and I went over there and I interviewed you, and then Kerry came in. And one thing I remember about Kerry, what a great guy. I'm just like, what a great person to have. You have had so many great people, but I want to take you back because, of course, on the internet you get to read about stuff that you've done, Wikipedia and your history, but what really impressed me the most, going back to high school, you were the student body president. In college, you were basically the student body president, created your own political, agenda, and you were so influential then. And I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, was it Steve Barkowski was your first client?
Yes.
Was that by accident, or did that kind of just, was it
Paul,
planned?
It really wasn't sports law then.
Yeah.
A team could tell an agent, we don't talk to players. So I was living in the dorms at Berkeley, working my way through law school, and they moved the freshman football team into the dorm, and one of them was Steve Barkowski. Well, I traveled for a year after law school. When I got back, I was choosing between jobs. Barkowski had been the very first player picked in the first round of the NFL draft.
Right.
He was picked by the Falcons, and there was a World Football League competing with the NFL. Yeah. And there I was, brimming with legal experience, never having represented anyone. So I had we got the largest rookie contract in NFL history. It eclipsed Joe Namath and O.J. Simpson, who were the previous standard bearers. So we get back to Atlanta. It's the night before the signing. And as we arrive at the airport, there are Klieg lights flashing in the sky, huge crowds pressed up against the police line, and the first thing we hear is, we interrupt the Johnny Carson show to bring you a special news bulletin. Steve Barkowski and his attorney have just arrived at the Atlanta airport. We switch you live for an in-depth interview. And it was really then I saw the idol worship and veneration that athletes are held in communities across the country, how they're the movie stars and the celebrities. And that's how I thought I could combine a career with underlying values and get athletes to retrace their roots to the high school community that helped shape them, collegiate community and the professional community, and set up programs that would enhance the quality of life. Right. 120 high school scholarship funds at the collegiate level, at players like Eric Karros and Troy Aikman endowed a full scholarship at UCLA, or Steve Young at BYU. Kerry Collins did that same thing at Penn State.
Oh, did he really?
And it's a way of saying this institution helped shape me. I'm going to put roots down here. I'm going to retrace these roots. At the pro level, we challenged athletes to find something in their own life they'd like to tackle and put together a foundation that had the leading business people, political figures, and community leaders on in each of those cities. So
right.
It could be work done with his Homes for the Holidays, where he paid the down payment so single mothers could move into the first home they'd ever own, and then we had Home Depot outfitted. Or the very first program was Rolf Panerchka's Kicks for Critters down in San Diego, where we raised millions of dollars for the Fund for Endangered Species at the San Diego Zoo with a poster pledge card program. But these athletes have a powerful ability to serve as role models. So
That's true.
When I had Lennox Lewis, the heavyweight champion, we had him cut a public service announcement that said, "Real men don't hit women." And that could do more to trigger attitudes towards domestic violence than 100 authority figures.
What did your parents do?
My father was a high school principal.
That's what I thought.
But his passion was human relations, so he sat on the Los Angeles City Human Relations Commission. And he really gave me two core values. One was to treasure relationships, especially family, and the second was try to be someone who changed the world for the better by helping people who couldn't help themselves. So that was all. I just sort of fell into business.
Well, you know, it's one of those things where, and I know I'm going to ask you some questions that you've answered thousands of times, so apologize for that. I always like to hear answers one-on-one, but you have done so many positive things, you know, outside of sports. I was just on PBS, you know, about 2 or 3 weeks ago. I guess time flies. It could have been longer. You were a guest on that show with Ed Arnold. But it wasn't about sports. Tell us about that, what that was, because it's a foundation and another cause.
Well, they were kind enough to give me the humanitarian or friend of the planet, well, an award like that from the Weiland Foundation.
He's gotten so many of them.
from the Weiland Foundation, who's the artist Weiland who does the big murals. And he's got an education program that helps bring the arts and the environment to kids across the country. So they run a whole variety of programs. But if you're going to talk to athletes about living in a community and making a difference, I always thought it was important. So, you know, when I loved films, I funded the Newport Beach Film Festival for years, or the Spirit Run so we could help the kids in grammar school, or the Human Relations Commission here in Orange County. We did a program where we took, called Steinberg Leadership, where we took kids from different ethnic backgrounds, got them together so they could interact and treasure their cultural differences, not be afraid.
You've done a lot, and you know, I've only asked them 2 questions, and we're already done with the first segment. Could be an hour show. We'll be back with more with Leigh Steinberg right here on Coach's Corner at the shops of Mission Viejo. Hello everybody, welcome back to this edition of Coach's Corner. Again, we're on location at the shops in Mission Viejo. Throughout the course of the show, you'll see an email address on there to Ty. If you've got a show idea in mind, or if you want to be a guest, you've got an idea, just email Ty. We'll get back to you and maybe get you on the board and be sitting alongside the likes of Leigh Steinberg joining me. And Leigh, you know, I still watch it when it comes on HBO, and I know we've talked about this in the past, but the movie Jerry Maguire, Tom Cruise, you were in the movie, you know, based on pretty much who you were and what you did. How has that changed? If that movie was made today, would it be much different than it was back when it was made?
I don't think so. The same competitiveness in the agency business, the same conflict between trying to make a difference in the world and being competitive, all those issues are still the same. The Jerry Maguire character struggles with it. The mission statement is sort of after my charitable and community programs, but it's sort of his arc. So the director Cameron Crowe called me up in 1993 and asked if he could follow me wherever I went like a fly on the wall, so that he could be ensconced in the world of sports agentry. So he went to the draft with me in '93, where I had Drew Bledsoe picked first. He went to pro scouting day at SC. He went to the league meetings out in Palm Desert. He came to a lot of games with me, Super Bowl party, and then just sat in the office for a long period of time. And then he wrote the script, and then I had to work to vet it. So the willing suspension of disbelief that's going to hold you in a film and not think it's a spoof didn't get broken. And then I worked with the actors. I took Cuba Gooding Jr. with me down to...
Pretty good athlete. Yeah.
He was great. And I went with him down to Arizona, and I made him pretend he was a wide receiver for a week. I actually had to show the quarterback, Jerry O'Connell, how to throw the ball because he had gone to NYU.
Oh my goodness.
And then they came to my office and took pictures out the window, and they took all my awards and put Jerry Maguire's name in it. They took my pictures and Tom Cruise's head, got superimposed, and so that was interesting. And Cameron I loved, and when I worked on Any Given Sunday next, Oliver Stone was a little different.
Oh yeah, much different, right? I read a blog that you have, and it's great that you're writing and you're continuing to contribute your words of wisdom. But I have a total of 5 kids. 4 of them are boys, 12 to 1 years old. Should they play football, tackle football? I mean, you wrote a really riveting article about concussions and head injuries. Even back in '94, when you said 94 there was a problem. They didn't recognize, they recognized it, but they didn't really tell anybody. But it's been going on since football was developed. Your thoughts about that? I know we could talk a whole show about that, but a little sidebar question for you.
I had 2 boys. They both played high school football at Corona Del Mar High School. So I wasn't successful in my own family. Football creates camaraderie, teaches self-respect, it teaches self-discipline, it teaches courage under pressure. It's so valuable for so many reasons. Here's the problem. It's a contact sport. And when you put 2 bodies in motion or have them hitting at the start of every play, it produces a low-level concussive effect. Football denied this all the way through 1994. And I held these concussion conferences in Newport Beach, and then I held them in Los Angeles because I didn't think it was enough to simply stack more dollars in the bank book and watch players go out. So what we discovered is that if you have 3 or more, there's an exponentially higher risk for ALS, Parkinson's, premature senility, elevated rates of depression, 4 times the rates of depression, dementia, and something called chronic traumatic encephalopathy. Here's the danger in high school. These brains are still developing, and it takes 3 to 4 times longer to recover, and they still need, as high schoolers, to use that brain to play. If you just take the simple act of an offensive and defensive lineman hitting together, low-level concussive event, you may have someone who plays high school, college, and later have 10,000 of these. And
it's like 10,000 small car accidents, is that right?
That's exactly right. And so I've called it a ticking time bomb and an undiagnosed health epidemic. The problem is everything we do to try to cure this, taking the blocking with the head out of the equation, or the tackling out of the equation, or looking at playing surface, or having mandatory sit-out periods. Baseline testing is what every parent needs to have their child do now, because it gives a cognitive level prior to the play. Then when the player gets hit, you've got a way of measuring and keep him out of play again until he's asymptomatic at practice, before practice, at rest, exercise, then at practice, and then he goes into a game.
Junior Seau, only got a minute left in this segment, so we'll carry this question. I'm going to have you back a couple times. I'll ask you the question. I'll let you melt on it here for a second, because I don't want you to answer it, but maybe nod your head. Junior Seau shot himself in the chest as opposed to the head, and I'm guessing that he probably knew that his brain was going to be opened up and they were going to find exactly that he had brain damage. So I want to talk to you about that and get your opinion, because you did mention that in your article. So much to talk about. We're not going to get to it all tonight. Leigh Steinberg on this edition of Coach's Corner. So much to talk about on this edition of Coach's Corner, and before the break I was talking to Leigh about Junior Seau, and of course so many Charger fans, but Leigh, you and I didn't talk about this at the break for a reason. I wanted to get your honest answer. Do you think that the way he committed suicide was for a reason, and that he knew there might be a possibility that he did have brain damage because of football and wanted to tell a story?
Obviously, no one can go into another person's brain post-mortem, but clearly he knew that this was going to happen. There have been a series of chronic traumatic encephalopathy cases, and what happens is a player who has too many hits starts to get depressed. They don't know how to deal with post-career. They lose jobs. They alienate themselves from their family. And ultimately, in the case of Dave Duerson and others, they shoot themselves. Junior Seau knew, because the whole issue of these lawsuits is huge. I represented him for a couple of years mid-career, and very bright. He knew exactly what he was doing, my guess.
Your thoughts, one word answer to this: will professional football survive?
Yes.
Okay, and is it because there's so much money, so much popularity that people just might look the other way?
First of all, you've never had a sport in my lifetime dominate American viewing patterns this way. A number of weeks during the season, out of 90 Nielsen rated shows, the top 5, NCIS, 2.5 Men, all those other shows. Football in America, a nighttime pregame show, was third rated. They estimated that some weekends 183 million people watched. And that's to say nothing of fan attendance and fantasy leagues and betting and every other thing you could think of. This country is NFL crazy. It's lapped every other sport.
Yeah. You have negotiated, and I read this, and you corrected me if I'm wrong on the reading, over $2 billion in contract negotiations. That's mind-boggling to me. What does a sports agent to be need to know today? Do they have to be an attorney like you are? Do they have to know contract law? And if so, why? And your advice to these young men and women?
To get licensed by the NFLPA or by Major League Baseball. In football, there's a need for a postgraduate degree. Could be in anything. The question is, can you bring something value added to an athlete that he doesn't have? It's the ability to help him legally or financially, or bring some skill set that he doesn't already have. It's not that law school prepares you inherently for all sorts of things. It's the degree has credibility. The preparation they need is, first of all, to have a true passion for players. And second of all, a work ethic that's off the charts. These are hyper-competitive fields, so the young guy who thinks about how to do a resume, that someone mocked up a Sports Illustrated cover with himself on the cover, sent it to us. The whole issue was revolved around he and our firm. Wow. That's novel. You need to have something extra to get into sports, and then a monomaniacal work ethic, and especially in one's 20s, the ability to sort of put aside other things and be able to focus. That's not my requirement, it's the free enterprise's requirement, otherwise you'll get rolled.
You've got to be a people person, right? You're a people person. You've got to be able to...
Listening skills are really critical, Paul. People think it's all about persuasion. I need to get an athlete to list their values, how they feel about short-term economic gain, long-term economic security, family, profile, the ability to be a starter, being on a winning team. So part of it is peeling back the layers of the onion so that men who don't share very easily will tell you what their deepest anxieties and fears are and their greatest hopes and dreams. So it's not modular, it's person by person, getting into what is the right result for them.
With that said, and I know we're winding down, but you've had so many great clients and continue to have so many great relationships and clients. If you were to pick two, I know that for some reason Troy Aikman pops out in my mind. Still today, he's amazing. You've had so many, but do you pick out two of the top of all of them, or can you?
Warren Moon and I went through 23 years in football. He played 23 years in Canada in the National Football League. And he was a representative great role model. He set up a high school scholarship fund. He set up a college scholarship fund. He had a Crescent Moon Foundation where hundreds of kids went back to school on his scholarships, and I presented him at the Hall of Fame. And then, you know, between Steve Young and Troy Aikman and Rolf Benirschke and a whole series of, I sort of love them all.
You can't pick two.
But well, at one point, you know, I've had 60 first-round draft picks in football, and
that's unheard of.
The very first,
it's never going to happen again.
The very
he did it.
first pick in the draft 8 times. There were weekends we had half the starting quarterbacks. So, and now I'm ready to do it again.
That's right. That's what's fascinating, and I'm excited. Can I ask you your thoughts about youth sports? I'm a passion for getting kids off the couch. The video games, iPads, and all that, they are extremely addictive. Kids get roped up into it. How do we get these kids to continue to play sports starting at 6 years old up to 17? Your thoughts about that?
By parenting correctly. I wrote a book on youth parenting that I haven't published yet. It's how parents can nurture a sense of self-esteem and not crush it at a very early age. Get those kids to have fun, to participate, to not be so hyper-focused on winning young that they lose it. There's plenty of time later to get that way. But sports teach so many fundamental values. It's about teamwork, camaraderie. It's about setting a goal and working towards it. It's about the ability to think clearly under pressure. Right. These are all life lessons that we want these kids to know. And the truth of the matter is, the more we learn as our generation ages, my generation, your generation.
I'm not that far behind.
Eternally
I got makeup
young.
on. You know?
Is that it's exercise and activity that's the key to longevity. Yeah. It's exercise that stops, you know, obesity and diabetes and aging in all sorts of ways. So you get those young people started early, and once you get them into the experience, encourage them. Parents have to be careful not to put type A behavior onto their kids. I'll tell you a quick story. So my daughter Katie lost with her soccer team in the playoffs. So she's out there crying. So I said, "Oh, Katie, I feel, you know, there'll be other seasons." She said, "Dad, I'm not crying because we lost. I'm crying because I don't get to see my friends on the team as much."
Wow.
So be careful about letting kids have their experiences without assuming it's all about, you know, being the star or winning.
You know when a sign of a good interview is when, I'm not saying I'm doing a good interview, but I'm saying when you have a lot of questions left to ask. And I have a lot of questions left to ask, so we'll try to have Leigh back again as he continues to surge out there again and again. Amazing story. Leigh Steinberg. Leigh, there's so many more things I want to talk to you about. At one point, when I was in his office back in the day, interviewing him, and he was in the midst of round 1 draft picks and signing quarterbacks, I was going to ask him if he could represent me. Maybe one day I'll ask him now. Thanks so much for joining me.
My pleasure.
You did a fantastic job. Leigh Steinberg, thanks so much for joining us right here on Coach's Corner for Mvtv Channel 30. It's the best in the city, no doubt about it. We're doing something that nobody else is doing, and we're going to continue to do it. Thanks for watching. I'm Paul Higgins.